Welcome to Rica Subtest 1 online test preparation course presented by ricatest.com. We are thrilled that you're joining us on this lesson where you will learn everything you need to know about Competency 4, which covers concepts about print, letter recognition, and the alphabetic principle. Concepts about print are the essential principles and formats of letters, words, and sentences in a written language. There are four concepts about print that we need to know about, and these include first, that print carries meaning. And this means that we need to teach students that the printed words convey meaning to the reader. The second concept about print is representation, which is achieved when students know the difference between a letter, a word, and a sentence. Furthermore, students demonstrate an understanding for concepts about print representation when the child can count the amount of letters that are in a word and they know where a sentence begins and where a sentence ends. The third concept about print is directionality. This is the ability to track print. A student demonstrates an understanding for directionality when they know that in English, we read from left to right and from top to bottom. Furthermore, if the teacher points to a word, the child can point to the word that should be read next. The fourth concept about print is book handling skills, and these are demonstrated when the child can point to the front cover versus the back cover, open to the title page, and can point to where the story starts and where it ends. There are multiple ways to facilitate a lesson in order to teach concepts about print. However, for your Rica test, we recommend using the shared book experience strategy, which teaches all four concepts about print that we just learned, including meaning, representation, directionality, and book handling skills. The purpose of the shared book experience is to read great books to children, to explore what's inside the book, and to show that reading is fun. When teaching a lesson using the shared book experience, the teacher uses a big book, meaning a physically oversized book, and starts by introducing the cover, author's name, the title page, and other aspects of the book. The teacher reads the story with full dramatic punch, and the teacher pauses for predictions from the students. Then the teacher and students have a discussion about the book, sharing their favorite parts of the book. And finally, the story is reread at a later time where students can reenact parts of the story. Your Rica test will ask you to demonstrate your understanding for how to cater to all of your students' needs. For struggling readers, use tactile and kinesthetic methods, such as using lettered tiles to help students tell the difference between a letter and a word. For English learners, use knowledge from the student's first language to transfer their skills to English instruction. For our advanced learners, increase the pace of instruction and or build on and extend their current set of skills and knowledge. In order to assess students' understanding for concepts about print, the teacher begins by picking a picture book and has a pen and paper for the teacher to take notes. The teacher then asks the student questions that will assess the student's concepts about print knowledge. The teacher will start with the question, how many words are on this line? If the student correctly identifies the amount of words on a line, they understand representation of concepts about print. The teacher will then ask, can you point to the words as I read them? Here, if the student can point to the correct words, the student demonstrates the understanding of directionality of concepts about print. Then, the teacher asks the student, can you show me where the story ends? If the student identifies the correct ending place, the student demonstrates an understanding for concepts about print for book handling skills. Finally, to assess if a child understands that print carries meaning, the teacher asks the student to write something. If the child writes letters, not squiggles or pictures, the child demonstrates the understanding that letters convey meaning. Now, let's move on to letter recognition. Studies show that young learners' ability to identify letters strongly predicts the student's future linguistic achievement. Children need to learn to recognize letters swiftly and accurately. And this is so important because letters are the building blocks of printed language, and students must be able to identify letters in order to succeed in later reading instruction, such as in phonics. In this section, you will learn about the following four key terms: letter recognition, which is the ability for a student to identify upper and lowercase letters. To assess letter recognition, the teacher says the name of the letter and the student points to that letter. Second is letter naming, and this is the ability for a student to say the name of a letter when the teacher points. Remember that letter naming is when the teacher points and the student says the letter's name. Letter formation, which is also called letter production, is the ability for a student to write the uppercase and the lowercase letters legibly. And then fourth, we have alphabetic principle, which is the understanding that in English, letters represent sounds. There are several ways to teach letter recognition. The method we like the most is to use visual, tactile, and kinesthetic methods, such as when kids use modeling clay to make letters. However, it's important to know other methods to be fully prepared for your Rica test. Other instructional methods include associating names or objects with letters, singing the alphabetic principle, using ABC books, and practicing writing with both uppercase and lowercase letters. When assessing letter recognition, the teacher will have a list of all 26 letters. The teacher will orally ask the student to point to the letter F, and the student points. If the student completes this task, they demonstrate an understanding for letter recognition because, hey, they're able to recognize the letter. Now, there are three groups of students that the Rica test will ask you to be able to effectively provide reading instruction for. Let's go over how to differentiate your instruction to meet the needs for your struggling students, specifically for letter recognition. First, for struggling readers, use tactile and kinesthetic methods, such as having the child write letters with their bare finger on the desktop, on paper and paint, or in sand. For English learners, we use knowledge from the student's L1, meaning first language, to transfer their skills to English instruction. And for our advanced learners, we increase the pace of instruction and we build on and we extend their current set of skills and knowledge. A student who demonstrates an understanding for the alphabetic principle knows that letters represent the sounds in words. On the other hand, a child who does not yet understand the alphabetic principle simply has little idea what the letters actually do on a page. Each time a teacher provides phonemic awareness, phonics, and spelling instruction, they are simultaneously reinforcing the alphabetic principle. But what do teachers need to do to explicitly and directly provide effective instruction to teach the alphabetic principle to our students? Well, we need to give our students writing practice. In other words, the students need to write. Furthermore, students must apply their knowledge of the alphabetic principle to attempt to match the correct letter sound correspondences together by sounding out words and blending sounds. Remember that students have not yet learned to spell all of the words they've learned to say. As young learners experiment with expressing themselves through writing, we as teachers need to encourage them to spell using their best ability and to not stop even if they get stuck on a spelling word. Providing differentiated instruction to help our struggling readers to learn the alphabetic principle will involve at least one of the following methods. You can hone in on key concepts, reteach skills that haven't been mastered yet using one to one intervention. You can use real life examples, provide additional practice, or use visual, auditory, kinesthetic, and tactile methods, which is the approach that we recommend that you use on your Rica test. In this case, the teacher gives letter tiles to the student and asks the student to create a word. By using the letter tiles, the student makes the word dog, D-O-G. Like letter recognition, providing differentiated instruction to teach the alphabetic principle involves finding relevant places in the student's first language where the student can transfer their knowledge from that first language to better understand, better learn English. Notice again, however, that some languages are going to be more difficult to find transfer points than others. Providing differentiated instruction for our advanced learners will often involve increasing the pace of instruction and or building onto the current set of knowledge and skills. And I might sound like a broken record on this course, but understand that this is actually advantageous for you, as if you get a practice question on your Rica test about advanced learners, you will definitely know that you increase the pace of instruction and you build onto their current set of knowledge and skills. Now, in order to assess a student's understanding of the alphabetic principle, the teacher will want to observe the child reading aloud and to write. If the child attempts sounding out words while reading aloud or while writing, they are demonstrating an understanding for the alphabetic principle. Before we leave, let's recap the key takeaways from this lesson. Concepts about print are the essential principles and formats of letters, words, and sentences in a written language. The four concepts about print include meaning, representation, directionality, and book handling skills. Remember, meaning is that printed words express meaning. These words actually mean something that we read. Second is representation, which is achieved when the students know the difference between letters, words, and sentences. And directionality, which is the ability to track print. Remember, you put your thumb or your finger or a pen or pencil on the words that you read and you track it while you're reading it. And the fourth, book handling skills, is achieved when the child can point to the different parts of a book and understand where a story begins and where it ends. We teach concepts about print using the shared book experience, where the teacher uses a physically big book to directly and explicitly teach where the title is located, the difference between the front and the back cover, as well as show the students the words as the teacher reads aloud. The objective of the shared book experience is to not only teach the book handling skills, but to also involve the students in the story and remind them and teach them that reading is fun. We also learned that teaching letter recognition is extremely important because letters are the building blocks of printed language, and students must be able to identify letters in order to succeed in later reading instruction, such as in phonics. Next, we learned that knowing the alphabetic principle means understanding that letters represent sounds. We also learned about differentiating instruction for teaching concepts about print, letter recognition, and the alphabetic principle. And we saw that no matter which topic you're teaching, visual, auditory, kinesthetic, and tactile methods work very well for struggling learners. In addition, we want to try and find natural transfer points from a student's first language to English if they are an English learner. However, we know that depending on the student's first language, whether that's Spanish, Japanese, Chinese, Arabic, this can be more challenging, more difficult to find these connection points in some languages than others. Also, for our advanced learners, the RICA content specifications state that increasing the pace of instruction and extending on their current set of skills is the appropriate way to meet the needs for our advanced learners. Finally, there are two types of assessments. There's informal and there's formal assessments. We learned all about these three types of assessments in Competency 3, the last lesson, which includes entry level assessments, which are given prior to starting a lesson or a larger unit, just to understand which students know what about the topic that will be taught. Keep in mind that the entry level assessment is a formal assessment. The next assessment is the progress monitoring assessment, and this is an informal assessment where the teacher might ask a comprehension checking question about the book that's being read at that time, just to get a show of hands for who's grasping on, who's catching on, who's understanding the material that's being taught right now. Remember, that's in the middle of a lesson or a unit. And then lastly is the summative assessment. This is the other formal assessment, which allows the teacher to understand which students have met, have not met, or are exceeding the expectations for a particular standard. Thanks so much for joining us in this Rica Test lesson. When you're ready, go ahead, take the Competency 4 quiz to check your understanding for the test material, and we look forward to seeing you in the next lesson.